I had always been fascinated by abandoned places, and when my friends suggested we explore the old hospital on the outskirts of town, I couldn't say no. They had heard rumors of strange happenings there, but I was convinced it was all just urban legend. How wrong I was. As we approached the crumbling building, a feeling of unease washed over me. The hospital's windows were shattered, its facade dark and foreboding against the night sky. My friends and I cautiously pushed open the creaking double doors and stepped inside. The interior was a maze of dimly lit hallways and decaying rooms. The air was thick with a musty, damp smell, and our footsteps echoed eerily as we ventured deeper into the hospital's depths. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. As we explored, the suspense grew, and our nerves were on edge. Each room held a new, chilling discovery: a rusted wheelchair, a shattered mirror reflecting our frightened faces, and faded medical equipment strewn about. It was as if the hospital had been abandoned in haste, leaving behind a trail of forgotten horrors. The tension in our group was palpable, and we whispered nervously to one another. We were on edge, our senses heightened, but determined to see this adventure through. Then we heard it, a soft shuffling sound echoing from one of the darkened hallways. We froze, exchanging fearful glances. Someone else was in the hospital with us. Panic surged through us as we strained to listen. The shuffling grew louder, accompanied by hushed whispers. It wasn't long before we recognized the voices. Strangers, intruders who had found their way into the abandoned hospital, just like us. At first, we considered revealing ourselves, but fear held us back. Instead, we decided to hide, to see what they were up to. We ducked into an abandoned patient's room, our hearts pounding, and our breaths held in a terrified silence. We watched as the intruders passed by, their voices growing louder. They called out to us, thinking we were playing a prank on them, but we stayed hidden. The minutes stretched into an agonizing hour as they combed the hospital for us, their footsteps drawing nearer and then fading away. Finally, when we thought they had given up, we dared to leave our hiding spot. Trembling and drained, we made our way back to the entrance, convinced that the intruders had abandoned their search. But as we reached the double doors, the shuffling and whispers returned, closer than ever before. It hit me like a nightmare. The intruders were still here, still following us. Panic welled up, and we sprinted back into the hospital, desperate to find another hiding place. We discovered a small janitor's closet, and we huddled inside, our breaths heavy with fear. Time crawled by as we waited in the cramped darkness. We listened as the intruders' voices grew more frantic, their footsteps echoing through the corridors. It felt like an eternity before they finally stopped searching and left the hospital. When we were certain they were gone, we emerged from the closet, our hearts heavy with dread. We had to leave to put this horrifying ordeal behind us. We crept back to the entrance, moving as silently as possible. I had always been curious about my family's history, and so, on a brisk September evening, I found myself standing at the entrance of the old cemetery where my grandfather was buried. The moon hung low in the sky, casting unsettling silhouettes across the gravestones, and a sense of unease settled deep within me as I stepped through the wrought iron gates. I had heard countless stories about this place, tales of restless spirits and strange happenings, but I dismissed them as mere superstitions. After all, I didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural. I was here for one reason and one reason only: to pay my respects at my grandfather's tomb. The graveyard was unnaturally quiet, the silence broken only by the faint rustling of leaves in the autumn breeze. The only source of light was the dim glow of the street lamps on the nearby road, casting long, eerie outlines that seemed to dance around the tombstones. A chill gripped me as I made my way deeper into the cemetery, a nagging feeling of foreboding settling upon me. I finally found my grandfather's grave, an aging stone marker partially hidden by overgrown grass. As I knelt down to place a bouquet of flowers, that sense of unease refused to dissipate. It was as if the very air around me held its breath, waiting for something ominous to happen. A gnawing sense of paranoia settled in as I continued to pay my respects. It felt as though invisible eyes were boring into my back, but each time I turned to look, there was no one there. Just the gravestones standing sentinel in the dim moonlight. As I stood up, ready to leave, I saw her. A woman dressed entirely in white, her long hair flowing like a cascade of silk. She stood among the tombstones, her back to me, and for a moment, I thought she was a mourner paying her respects like me. But then she turned, and a cold shiver gripped my entire body. Her gaze was fixed on me with a malevolent intensity. She stared, her unblinking gaze never wavering, and I could feel her eyes piercing through my very soul. Panic welled up inside me, and I took a step back. That's when she screamed, a high-pitched, bone-chilling scream that reverberated through the graveyard. It was as if the very earth beneath my feet trembled in response to her terror-inducing wail. Without thinking, I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I sprinted towards the cemetery's exit, desperate to escape the horrifying encounter. But as I reached the gate, I was met with a sight that defied belief. A group of dark figures, cloaked in shadow, blocked my path. They began to move, slowly but relentlessly advancing towards me. I couldn't go back, and there was no way I could face whatever those things were. My only option was to go forward. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and sprinted deeper into the cemetery, searching for another way out. My breath came in ragged gasps, and the relentless pursuit of the shadowy figures pushed me to the brink of exhaustion. I rounded a corner and saw a high wall looming ahead. It was my only chance. I sprinted toward it, and with every ounce of strength left in me, leaped over it. I landed on the other side, my body aching from the impact, but I was free from the clutches of those nightmarish beings. As I stumbled away from the cemetery, my mind raced with fear and confusion. What had I just encountered? Who was that woman in white, and what were those shadowy figures? I knew one thing for sure. I would never return to that cemetery again, and the mysteries of that dreadful night would haunt me forever. I was driving down a desolate stretch of highway, surrounded by dense woods and miles away from civilization. The sun was setting, casting an eerie twilight over the landscape. That's when I saw it, a worn, rusted sign that simply read, "Abandoned Amusement Park, Exit 13. Curiosity got the better of me. I had hours of driving ahead, and the prospect of exploring a forgotten amusement park in the fading light seemed more enticing than another gas station sandwich. I took the exit, my tires crunching on gravel as I followed a winding road that led me deeper into the woods. The park emerged from the gloom like a relic from another time. The entrance gate, with its faded paint and squeaky hinges, stood ajar, welcoming me with an eerie creak. The sight was surreal. Rides that had once been vibrant and inviting were now silent and overgrown with ivy. The once bright colors had faded to a ghostly palette of grays and greens. I parked my car and stepped out, the silence broken only by the distant hum of cicadas. My footsteps echoed through the empty park as I began to explore. The Ferris wheel loomed above me, its skeletal structure a stark contrast to the darkening sky. I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. As I ventured further into the park, I noticed something unsettling. It was as if the remnants of the past visitors still lingered here. An abandoned cotton candy cart stood by the tilt-a-whirl, its sugary scent hanging in the air. A child's forgotten stuffed animal lay near the entrance to the fun house, its glassy eyes staring up at me. The park had an uncanny way of playing tricks on my senses. I heard faint laughter, the distant echoes of joyful screams. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the long-forgotten visitors were still here in spirit, reliving their moments of happiness. Night fell, and the park took on a new level of eeriness. The world was now bathed in a surreal half-light. Rusted swings swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of a carousel creaking and turning echoed through the air. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate. Approaching the carousel, I could see the broken horses frozen in mid-gallop. The music, long since silenced, seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I felt a strange compulsion to take a seat on one of the horses. As I settled onto the cold, cracked saddle, the carousel began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster, the music growing louder with each rotation. I clung to the reins, my heart pounding in my chest. But then, I heard something beneath the music, a sinister whisper, a raspy voice calling out. I turned my head and saw a figure emerge from the shadows. A man, gaunt and disheveled, with a wicked grin on his face. He was trying to lure children onto the carousel, his voice a twisted melody. Panicked, I jumped off the horse and stumbled back, away from the carousel and the creepy man. The world around me blurred, and I felt myself being transported back to the cold, empty darkness of the abandoned park. The music faded away, leaving only the silence and the unsettling feeling that I was not alone.